What if the greatest catastrophe in recorded human history, a cataclysm that scoured the very face of the earth and reset the trajectory of civilization, wasn't merely a capricious act of nature? What if, instead, it was a meticulously orchestrated event, a deliberate and calculated purging designed not for destruction, but for an audacious, albeit brutal, regenesis? We are speaking, of course, of the Great Deluge, a narrative woven into the very fabric of countless ancient cultures, a story dismissed by many as mere myth, yet stubbornly persistent across continents and through millennia. But what if the architects of this aqueous apocalypse weren't some abstract, vengeful deity, but rather beings of flesh and blood, albeit of an origin far beyond our terrestrial understanding? What if the Anunnaki, those enigmatic figures from Sumerian tablets, were not just cosmic visitors, but profound engineers of our destiny, willing to submerge an entire world to achieve their grand, unfathomable design for humanity? The very idea sends a shiver down the spine, doesn't it? To think that our fragile existence might have been pruned, refined, and restarted by an alien intelligence, a cosmic gardener tending to an unruly patch of sentient life. It demands a recalibration of everything we thought we knew about our origins, our vulnerabilities, and the silent, watchful eyes that may have presided over our earliest, most tumultuous beginnings. The prevailing narratives often paint the Anunnaki as gods, benevolent or wrathful, yet always powerful. But here we explore a different facet, the strategist, the decision-maker, the being capable of wielding planetary forces with a precision that belies our understanding of ancient times. This isn't just about a flood. It's about control, intervention, and the chilling prospect of a planned reboot. If this beginning has already made you reconsider what you thought you knew, just imagine what else lies submerged beneath the surface of history. So do tap that like button and subscribe to the channel, because here, every video unearths something few dare to acknowledge. Our journey begins not with the thunderous roar of the deluge, but with the quiet, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere of ancient Earth, a planet where, according to a particular strain of unorthodox interpretation of Sumerian cuneiform, the Anunnaki had established a significant, though often concealed, presence. They were not merely observers. They were, in many respects, the very architects of nascent human civilization. These beings, often described in ancient texts with an almost ethereal glow, possessed an intellect and a technological prowess that dwarfed anything the emerging human populations could comprehend. They moved amongst the early settlements with an air of detached authority, their movements precise, their decisions absolute, often communicated through intermediaries or powerful emissaries who held sway over the burgeoning human societies. The very air around them seemed to hum with an unseen energy, a testament to their advanced understanding of the universe. The Anunnaki, so the narrative goes, had a specific purpose for humanity. They had engineered us, or at the very least, genetically manipulated a pre-existing hominid species to serve their immediate needs, primarily the arduous task of mining precious gold from the Earth's crust, a resource they purportedly required for the very sustenance of their home planet Nibiru, or perhaps for the intricate systems that maintained their long-distance space travel. It was a symbiotic, if profoundly unequal, relationship. Humans provided the labor, the sweat and toil, their primitive bodies strong and resilient, while the Anunnaki provided the oversight, the knowledge, and occasionally the tools and techniques that slowly dragged early humanity from the primeval mud. They taught methods of irrigation, basic metallurgy, and the rudiments of organized society, all with the underlying agenda of optimizing human efficiency in their service. The landscape of Mesopotamia, with its fledgling cities of baked mud brick and its sprawling agricultural plains, bore the invisible imprint of their extraterrestrial influence, a carefully cultivated garden of labor. However, As generations passed and the human population expanded exponentially, a new set of challenges began to emerge. The very project that had necessitated humanity's creation was now, ironically, becoming complicated by it. The humans, once a relatively simple and obedient workforce, began to exhibit qualities that, from the Anunnaki perspective, were proving problematic. They multiplied far beyond what was initially anticipated, their numbers swelling like a fast-rising river, spreading across the Fertile Crescent and beyond. With this proliferation came an increase in social complexity, which, for the Anunnaki, translated into an alarming rise in what they perceived as chaos. The rudimentary societal structures they had helped establish were strained, giving way to intertribal conflicts, widespread squalor, and a general cacophony of human existence that grated against the Anunnaki's inherent sense of order and efficiency. The guttural sounds of argument, the wails of lament, the ceaseless chatter of burgeoning populations, it all began to accumulate, a disharmonious chorus that echoed across the plains, even reaching the insulated, technologically advanced dwellings of their overseers. The gold mining operations, while still productive, were now plagued by inefficiencies. The humans, despite their physical prowess, were proving to be emotionally volatile, prone to idleness, and increasingly difficult to manage on a grand scale. Their devotion to the Anunnaki, once unwavering, was waning as they grappled with their own internal struggles and the burgeoning complexities of their own burgeoning societies. The original purpose, the extraction of gold, remained paramount, but the means to that end were becoming mired in a swamp of human imperfection. The very creation that was meant to solve a problem now presented a new, more profound one. The air itself, once clean and crisp, was now often thick with the smoke of countless fires, the stench of unmanaged refuse, and the palpable tension of a species finding its footing, often clumsily, in a world not entirely its own. The Anunnaki, from their lofty vantage points, observed these developments with a mixture of clinical detachment and growing exasperation, their highly attuned senses recording every deviation from their meticulously calculated ideal. The concept of a planned deluge isn't merely a dramatic flourish, it emerges from a careful reading of certain ancient texts, notably the Epic of Gilgamesh and various Sumerian tablets, which describe a council of gods debating the fate of humanity. These aren't abstract deities. They are presented as highly intelligent, somewhat bureaucratic beings with agendas and disagreements. The decision to initiate a planetary reset, therefore, would have been anything but impulsive. Imagine the hushed, almost sterile chambers where these beings convened, their voices echoing with a resonant clarity, each word carrying immense weight. It wasn't a sudden burst of divine rage, but a series of calculated assessments, a thorough evaluation of an ongoing project. The problem, as they saw it, was not necessarily the malice of humanity, but its burgeoning, untamed nature, its unpredictable evolutionary path. The Anunnaki, it is posited, viewed humanity with a complex mix of proprietorship and scientific interest. We were, in essence, an experiment that had perhaps diverged too far from the initial parameters. The early human stock, engineered to be robust and compliant, had evolved emotions, self-awareness, and a burgeoning sense of individuality that complicated their role as mere laborers. They had begun to develop their own cultures, their own pantheons, sometimes even questioning the Anunnaki's absolute authority. This independent streak, while perhaps fascinating from a purely academic standpoint, was detrimental to the overarching Anunnaki agenda. The very essence of humanity's progress, its burgeoning creativity, its emotional depth, its capacity for both profound love and destructive hatred, was seen as an impediment. The sounds of their daily lives, once a distant hum, had grown into a clamor that pierced the Anunnaki's ordered existence, a constant reminder of the sprawling, uncontrolled project they had initiated. The council meetings, if one were to imagine them, would have been fraught with tension, despite the Anunnaki's outwardly composed demeanor. Enlil, often depicted as the stern, uncompromising leader among the Anunnaki on Earth, would have presented a compelling case for a drastic solution. His arguments would have focused on the escalating logistical nightmare, the depletion of resources required to maintain order, and the potential contamination of the larger cosmic experiment if humanity were allowed to continue unchecked. He would have pointed to the burgeoning human numbers, the increasing squalor, the incessant clamor of their nascent civilizations, a disharmony that, from his perspective, was an affront to the carefully calibrated cosmic order. The very air within their command centers, usually still and heavy with the hum of advanced technology, would have been thick with the gravity of the impending decision, each Anunnaki member weighing the colossal implications of such a monumental act. Conversely, Enki, often portrayed as the creator of humanity and a more sympathetic figure, might have argued for a more nuanced approach. He, perhaps more than any other Anunnaki, understood the intricacies of human biology, the subtle nuances of their emotional landscape, having been intimately involved in their genetic inception. His voice, perhaps softer but no less authoritative, might have proposed alternative solutions, further genetic intervention, a stricter regimen of control, or even a period of forced migration to other, less resource-critical regions of the planet. He might have appealed to the intrinsic value of the human spirit, the nascent potential he saw blossoming amidst the chaos. The debates would have been lengthy, perhaps spanning what we would consider years, conducted with an alien logic that prioritized efficiency and cosmic balance over individual sentient life, yet still acknowledging the complexities of their own creation. The metallic glint in their eyes, usually steady and calculating, might have flickered with the intensity of their internal deliberations, each gesture, each pause, carrying unspoken volumes of their deep-seated philosophical divides. Ultimately, the decision was made. The scales tipped in favor of a complete planetary reset. It wasn't merely a matter of stopping the mining operations. It was about pruning the entire genetic tree, ensuring that only a select few deemed pure or compliant enough would survive to repopulate a cleansed world. This wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a cosmic intervention, an act of selective breeding on an unimaginable scale. The intent was clear, to restart humanity, but this time under stricter, more controlled conditions. The blueprints for a new world, a new breed of humans, were already being drafted in the minds of the Anunnaki architects, their advanced systems whirring with the immense computational power required to simulate and plan such a colossal undertaking. The weight of this decision, the sheer audacity of it, hung heavy in the silent, expectant air of their hidden enclaves, a chilling testament to their power and their profoundly alien moral compass. The logistics of orchestrating a global deluge are staggering, even for an advanced civilization. This wasn't merely about a few heavy downpours or a particularly bad storm season. This required planetary-scale manipulation, a precise calibration of cosmic forces that would trigger a cataclysm of unparalleled magnitude. According to some interpretations, the Anunnaki possessed the technology to influence celestial bodies, to subtly shift planetary orbits, or to even redirect comets and asteroids. Imagine their vast, gleaming control rooms, far removed from the dirt and clamor of the human world below. Teams of Anunnaki specialists, their forms often described as tall and regal, their faces impassive yet intensely focused, would have meticulously calibrated parameters, adjusting for atmospheric pressure, oceanic currents, and tectonic plate movements. The very air within these command centers would have vibrated with the silent hum of incomprehensible machinery, the holographic projections displaying swirling weather patterns and intricate geological models. The method, as hypothesized by proponents of this theory, involved a multi-pronged approach. One prominent idea suggests a precise gravitational alignment of celestial bodies, perhaps involving their own home planet, Nibiru, passing unusually close to Earth. Such an event would induce immense tidal stresses, not just in the oceans, but deep within the Earth's mantle, triggering widespread seismic activity. Tremors would have begun subtly at first, distant rumblings barely perceptible to the humans below, like the low growl of a sleeping beast. But gradually, these vibrations would intensify, shaking the ground beneath their feet, causing fissures in the bedrock and sending unsettling cracks through the mud-brick walls of their rudimentary dwellings. The very ground would feel alive, anxious, a premonition of the Earth's impending wrath. Simultaneously, the Anunnaki are believed to have possessed the capacity for advanced atmospheric manipulation. Imagine them deploying vast orbital platforms, silent sentinels circling the globe, capable of injecting massive quantities of aerosolized particles into the upper atmosphere, or perhaps even altering the magnetosphere. This could have triggered unprecedented weather phenomena, superstorms forming with alarming speed, their towering clouds pregnant with moisture, their roiling forms casting vast, ominous shadows across the land. The atmospheric pressure would have dropped precipitously, making breathing feel heavy, while a strange metallic tang might have permeated the air, a scent unknown to any human before or since, a harbinger of the technological cataclysm about to unfold. The sky itself would have become a canvas of violent, unnatural colors, a sickly yellow merging with bruised purples and angry reds, reflecting the immense energies being unleashed. The oceans, already agitated by the gravitational shifts and the rapidly changing atmospheric pressure, would have begun to swell, not just from rainfall, but from immense tectonic upheavals on the seabed. Underwater volcanoes, previously dormant, would roar to life, spewing steam and magma, superheating vast swathes of the ocean and causing rapid thermal expansion. Imagine colossal tsunamis, not just a few meters high, but hundreds, perhaps even thousands of feet tall, gathering momentum across the vast, unbroken expanse of the ancient seas. These walls of water would have moved with an unstoppable force, a liquid juggernaut swallowing coastlines whole, obliterating everything in their path. The sound would have been deafening, a monstrous roar unlike any known animal, a sound that would have stripped away all hope and filled the hearts of those who heard it with a primal, incapacitating terror. The world before the deluge, as glimpsed through archaeological remnants and mythological fragments, was a verdant, sprawling expanse, dotted with burgeoning proto-cities and agrarian communities. Humans, though not yet possessing the sophisticated technologies of later civilizations, had nevertheless established intricate social structures. They lived in settlements, ranging from simple huts to more elaborate mud-brick dwellings, cultivating crops along riverbanks, tending livestock, and developing early forms of writing and rudimentary craftsmanship. Their days were governed by the rhythms of the sun and the seasons, their lives intertwined with the land and the often demanding presence of their gods, the Anunnaki, who, from their towering ziggurats or more discreet hidden enclaves, would issue decrees and oversee their labor. The landscape itself would have been teeming with life. Dense forests would have cloaked ancient mountain ranges, their canopies a riot of greens and browns, home to species long extinct. Vast grassy plains would have stretched to the horizon, crisscrossed by meandering rivers, their banks fertile and inviting for human settlement. The air would have been thick with the hum of insects, the chirping of birds, and the distant calls of wild animals. The early humans, adapted to this environment, would have moved with a natural grace, their bodies hardened by physical labor and their senses honed by a life lived in close proximity to nature. They built their homes from the earth itself, fired clay bricks hardening under the fierce sun, their villages growing organically around central communal spaces. Their pottery, though simple, bore intricate patterns, and their nascent religious iconography hinted at a deep connection to the cosmos, perhaps an unconscious reflection of their alien overlords. However, as the Anunnaki observed, this burgeoning human world was also becoming increasingly chaotic. The very fertility of the land, coupled with the Anunnaki's influence in providing basic societal structures, had allowed for an unprecedented population boom. Settlements grew into larger towns, then into what could be considered the world's first cities, albeit on a scale far removed from our modern metropolises. With this growth came overcrowding, sanitation issues, and an increase in internal conflicts. The communal harmony of smaller tribes began to fragment under the pressures of larger populations, leading to disputes over resources, territory, and social standing. The once clear directives from the Anunnaki were perhaps being misinterpreted, or worse, deliberately ignored by human leaders vying for their own power. The Anunnaki's perspective was one of scientific detachment, overlaid with a utilitarian agenda. They saw the increasing human population as a resource that was becoming unmanageable, a complex system spiraling out of their intended parameters. The very soundscape of the pre-deluge world would have become a cacophony from their highly sensitive perception. The incessant babble of human voices, the wails of children, the bellows of livestock, the shouts of argument, the incessant rhythmic pounding of manual labor. It was a symphony of chaos that jarred with their desire for order and efficiency. The subtle nuances of human emotion, so vital to our own understanding of existence, were likely viewed by the Anunnaki as inconvenient variables, unpredictable elements that threatened the stability of their grand genetic project. They had, in their own alien way, become weary of humanity's incessant demands, its petty squabbles, and its burgeoning independence. You've got to stop and ponder, haven't you? This isn't just a tale of ancient gods, but of incredibly advanced beings making a clinical decision about an entire species. Have you ever considered the sheer, cold logic it would take to wipe the slate clean like that? What if it were your lot, your world, judged inadequate? What would you have done if you were among those who saw the signs, the subtle shifts in the atmosphere, the growing unease among the elders, and were faced with the unthinkable truth? Comment below if you've ever felt that chilling uncertainty about what forces might truly be at play behind the curtain of our reality. Just type, "This is unbelievable," in the comments, just so I know you're right there with me on this journey. Not all Anunnaki were in agreement, however. This internal conflict, central to the narrative of the deluge in ancient texts, highlights a crucial point. These were not monolithic, single-minded entities. They had their own internal politics, their own philosophical divides. Enki, the one often credited with the creation of humanity and a figure of profound biological knowledge, reportedly felt a deep, if paternalistic, attachment to his creation. He saw the potential for growth, for a different kind of order, even amidst the chaos. He viewed the decision to wipe out humanity as a colossal waste, a reckless destruction of a complex genetic blueprint that held untold future possibilities. His arguments in the Anunnaki council chambers would have been impassioned, laden with scientific data and a subtle plea for the preservation of life, even if that life was flawed by their own exacting standards. It is within this framework of dissent that the story of Utnapishtim, or Noah as he is known in later Abrahamic traditions, emerges. He was not chosen at random. According to the Sumerian narrative, Utnapishtim was a particularly pious and righteous human, one who had maintained a strong, respectful connection with the Anunnaki, specifically with Enki. He was a man of integrity, a skilled craftsman, and a leader of his community, perhaps representing the best of what humanity had to offer in those troubled times. His diligence in following the Anunnaki's directives, His quiet respect and his capacity for understanding the world around him likely set him apart from the burgeoning, often tumultuous, human masses. He embodied the qualities of stability and potential that Enki still saw within his creation. Enki, operating in defiance of the full Anunnaki Council's decree, specifically that of Enlil, who had sworn all the Anunnaki to an oath of secrecy regarding the impending catastrophe, decided to intervene. His act was one of calculated rebellion, a quiet subversion of a mandate he considered unjust. He couldn't openly defy the council, as that would have led to severe repercussions, perhaps even his own ostracism or punishment, so he found a clandestine way. He communicated with Utnapishtim not directly, but through a reed screen, a physical barrier that allowed him to speak without technically breaking his oath. Imagine the scene, the rhythmic rustling of the reeds, the soft murmur of Enki's voice, carefully modulated to appear as if it were the wind, carrying urgent warnings and precise instructions to a bewildered but observant Utnapishtim. The instructions were clear, astonishingly detailed, and utterly terrifying. Utnapishtim was to construct a colossal vessel, an ark of immense proportions, capable of housing not just his family, but also a carefully selected genetic cross-section of Earth's fauna. The specifications for the ark were precise. Its dimensions, the materials to be used, the method of waterproofing, the compartments for storing provisions. Enki would have imparted knowledge far beyond human comprehension, advanced architectural principles, and even specific types of wood and bitumen that possessed superior resilience. Utnapishtim, a man of faith and practical skill, would have listened with a mixture of awe and growing dread, his mind grappling with the monumental task being laid before him, his hands already itching to begin the impossible construction. The construction of the ark would have been a monumental undertaking, a clandestine operation shrouded in an aura of madness and despair. Utnapishtim, guided by Enki's precise instructions, would have gathered his family and a few trusted individuals, all sworn to absolute secrecy. They would have worked tirelessly under the cover of darkness where possible, cutting timber from the thickest, most resilient trees, smelting metals in roaring furnaces, and mixing vast quantities of tar and pitch for waterproofing. The sheer physical exertion involved, the blisters on their hands, the sweat stinging their eyes, would have been immense. Their neighbors, oblivious to the impending doom, would have watched with suspicion and ridicule, perhaps dismissing Utnapishtim as an eccentric, a madman obsessed with an impossible landlocked boat. The laughter and jeers would have echoed through the air, mocking the family's relentless, frantic labor, unknowingly celebrating their own impending oblivion. While Utnapishtim and his small band toiled, the world above and around them began to show increasingly ominous signs. The subtle tremors, once distant and infrequent, became more pronounced, rattling their teeth and causing cracks to spiderweb across ancient stones. The weather patterns grew erratic and violent. Instead of predictable seasonal rains, there would be sudden, torrential downpours followed by oppressive, humid stillness. The skies, often clear and azure, now frequently churned with strange, greenish-black clouds that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. Animals, instinctively attuned to shifts in their environment, would have grown restless, their behavior becoming erratic. Flocks of birds would abruptly take flight in panic, herds of wild beasts would stampede without apparent cause, and domestic animals would whimper and whine, their senses overwhelmed by the pre-cataclysmic shifts. The Anunnaki themselves, from their hidden vantage points, would have observed these accelerating signs with clinical precision. Their monitors would have shown ever-increasing seismic activity, vast pressure changes in the atmosphere, and the ominous growth of superstorm systems across the planet. The very air would have thrummed with unseen energies as the final stages of their planetary engineering project came online. the subtle manipulations of celestial mechanics would have reached their apex, pulling at Earth's fragile equilibrium. There would have been a chilling sense of inevitability, a cosmic clock ticking down to zero, each second bringing the world closer to its watery fate. The decision, though made in cold calculation, was now being executed with terrifying, unstoppable force, a testament to the Anunnaki's immense power and their absolute resolve. The final days, before the true fury of the deluge was unleashed, would have been a tapestry of frantic activity and growing despair. Utnapishtim, his ark finally nearing completion, would have begun the arduous task of gathering the animals. Not just a few, but pairs of every kind, a living genetic library. Imagine the chaos, the sounds of countless creatures, the bellows of cattle, the bleating of sheep, the chirping of birds, the slithering of snakes, all being herded towards the enormous, strangely out-of-place vessel. The air would have been thick with the scent of damp earth, agitated animals, and the metallic tang of fear, a smell that clung to everything. His family and trusted workers would have been exhausted, their bodies aching, their minds reeling from the enormity of their task and the pervasive sense of dread that hung over them like a shroud. Then came the moment. The heavens opened, not with rain, but with a torrent, a cascade of water so vast it seemed to originate from beyond the sky itself. It wasn't just water falling. It was as if the very fabric of the cosmos was unraveling, tearing open to unleash an endless, liquid onslaught. The description in ancient texts is chilling. All the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of heaven were opened. This wasn't merely meteorological, it suggested a simultaneous cataclysm from above and below. Colossal geysers of water would have erupted from deep within the Earth's crust, tearing through the surface with unimaginable force, adding to the overwhelming deluge from the sky. The ground would have buckled and twisted, chasms opening up, as if the earth itself were screaming in agony. The sound would have been a deafening roar, a combination of crashing waves, splitting earth, and the ceaseless, overwhelming downpour, a sound that would have rendered all other senses irrelevant. The ark, a beacon of improbable hope amidst the chaos, would have been tossed and buffeted by the rising waters. Utnapishtim and his family, huddled inside, would have felt the violent lurches, the terrifying creaks and groans of the timber as the vessel struggled against the unimaginable forces arrayed against it. The sounds inside would have been a cacophony of terrified animal cries, the sobbing of children and the whispered prayers of the adults, all drowned out by the thunderous roar of the storm outside. The air would have been heavy with the dampness, the smell of fear, and the pervasive darkness that engulfed them, broken only by the flickering light of oil lamps. Outside, the world they knew would have been dissolving, its mountains shrinking, its valleys disappearing, swallowed whole by the relentless, all-consuming waters. The Anunnaki, from their orbital positions, would have watched impassively, their advanced instruments recording every detail of the planetary purge, their genetic experiment now fully underway, a controlled destruction for a planned regenesis. The deluge wasn't merely a rainstorm. It was a cosmic event, a period of utter chaos and darkness that stretched over days, then weeks, then months. Ancient texts speak of the waters of oblivion, a description that perfectly encapsulates the absolute eradication of the old world. Imagine the earth, shrouded in a perpetual twilight, obscured by an unbroken canopy of storm clouds and the ceaseless pounding rain. The sky would have been a terrifying monochromatic grey, occasionally rent by flashes of lightning that illuminated a world transformed into an endless, turbulent sea. The air would have been thick with moisture, the taste of salt and fear on every tongue. There would have been no horizon, no land in sight, just the relentless, swirling expanse of water, punctuated by the ghostly outlines of submerged peaks and the occasional heartbreaking debris of a lost civilization. Inside the Ark, the passage of time would have been marked by the rhythmic lurching of the vessel, the ceaseless roar of the storm, and the desperate struggle for survival. Utnapishtim and his family, beyond the initial terror, would have settled into a grim routine, feeding the animals, cleaning out the stalls, rationing their dwindling supplies, every action imbued with a sense of desperate purpose. The air within the Ark would have been heavy with the mingled scents of damp wood, animal musk, and human anxiety. The sounds would have been a constant symphony of animal rustlings, low moans, and the unceasing drumming of the rain on the Ark's sturdy roof. The children, perhaps too young to fully grasp the enormity of the catastrophe, would have clung to their parents, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and bewildered curiosity. From the Anunnaki's perspective, observing from their orbital platforms or shielded lunar bases, the deluge was a controlled, albeit catastrophic success. Their advanced sensors would have tracked the receding shorelines, the gradual stabilization of tectonic plates, and the cleansing effect of the massive flood. The Earth, once a chaotic mosaic of burgeoning human settlements and natural wilderness, was now a pristine, albeit barren, blue marble, scarred by the recent upheaval, but ready for a fresh start. Their goal wasn't just destruction. It was a terraforming operation on an unprecedented scale, a reset button pressed with absolute precision. They would have monitored the Ark's progress, a solitary beacon of life, traversing the immense watery expanse, a testament to their calculated defiance and their subtle intervention. The long period of darkness and chaos would have been, for them, a necessary clinical phase in their grander long-term genetic project, an immense filtering mechanism to ensure that only the most resilient, the most compliant, would remain to populate the new world. The moment the rain finally ceased would have been an event of profound, almost religious significance. The silence, after weeks and months of incessant roaring water, would have been deafening, a sudden, shocking absence that left ears ringing. Utnapishtim, cautiously opening a hatch, would have been met not by the familiar sight of land, but by a vast, tranquil, yet utterly desolate ocean. The sky, though still overcast, would have offered glimpses of breaking clouds, patches of pale, washed-out blue, a promise of light after an eternity of darkness. The air, though still heavy with moisture, would have carried a new, clean scent, the smell of fresh rain and purified earth, a scent of beginnings. The Ark eventually came to rest on the peak of Mount Nisir, or Ararat in later traditions, a towering mountain that had miraculously remained above the floodwaters. The landing would have been a gentle bump, a shudder through the timbers, a final settling that signaled the end of their arduous journey. Stepping out onto the muddy, still damp slopes of the mountain, Utnapishtim and his family would have been met by a world utterly transformed. The once lush valleys were now vast, muddy plains, the familiar landmarks gone, replaced by an endless expanse of water and sediment. The silence, broken only by the chirping of a few adventurous birds, would have been profound, almost overwhelming, a testament to the colossal emptiness that now defined their reality. It was a world born anew, stark and pristine, but also terrifyingly empty. The task of repopulation and rebuilding, of tending to the animals and cultivating the soil, would have been daunting. But for Utnapishtim and his family, there was a sense of profound gratitude, a renewed understanding of their place in the grand cosmic scheme. They had been chosen, spared for a purpose, and they carried the immense burden and privilege of being the last remnants of the old world, and the progenitors of the new. The Anunnaki, observing from afar, would have noted the successful completion of the first phase of their reset. The surviving human stock was intact, albeit dramatically reduced, and now possessed a visceral, undeniable memory of the Anunnaki's power, an indelible lesson etched into their very beings. The survivors would be more malleable, more compliant, more aware of the consequences of straying from the path laid out for them. The immediate aftermath of the deluge was not one of celebration, but of profound adjustment and a chilling understanding of the Anunnaki's power. Utnapishtim, his family and the animals disembarked onto a muddy, scarred world. The very ground beneath their feet felt different, softer, more yielding, a testament to the immense sedimentary deposits left by the floodwaters. The air, while clean, carried a lingering dampness, a reminder of the recent cataclysm. The landscape was desolate, stripped bare of the familiar forests and vibrant ecosystems. It was a blank canvas, waiting for life to re-emerge, but it was also a stark monument to what had been lost. The sheer emptiness, the silence broken only by the lapping of distant waters and the tentative sounds of the surviving animals, would have been overwhelming. The Anunnaki, for their part, would have continued their meticulous observations. Their aerial craft, once perhaps hidden or camouflaged, might have become more visible, silently gliding over the vast, waterlogged expanses, their advanced sensors mapping the new topography. They weren't just observing for scientific curiosity, they were actively managing the repopulation and reconstruction efforts. The surviving humans, though few, were now a precious commodity, a meticulously selected genetic bottleneck from which a new humanity would spring. The Anunnaki's presence would have been both a source of dread and a necessary guide, their vast knowledge indispensable in the monumental task of rebuilding. Their directives, now imbued with the terrifying weight of recent memory, would have been followed with absolute obedience, without question or complaint. The narratives emerging from this post-deluge world speak of a new pact, a renewed understanding between the Anunnaki and humanity. The curse of overpopulation and chaos had been purged, and the remaining humans were instilled with a deeper reverence and fear for their creators. The Anunnaki would have provided guidance on agriculture, the domestication of animals, and the establishment of new, more structured societies. But this guidance would have come with an implicit, unshakable condition: adherence to their directives without deviation. The memory of the flood, passed down through generations, would serve as a perpetual warning, a chilling reminder of the consequences of their creator's displeasure. The very fear of another deluge would become a powerful tool of control, shaping human behavior for millennia. The Anunnaki's long-term plan, as theorized, extended far beyond merely rebooting the human population. It involved a careful, controlled evolution of humanity, guiding them towards a specific purpose or state of being. The genetic lineage of the survivors was likely considered superior or more amenable to their designs. This new humanity would be more resilient, perhaps less prone to the chaos that plagued their predecessors, and certainly more aware of the immense power wielded by their cosmic overlords. The early cities that arose in Mesopotamia after the flood, with their intricate canal systems, advanced administrative structures, and the prominent ziggurats, towering structures often interpreted as landing platforms or communication hubs for the gods, would be seen as direct manifestations of this Anunnaki guidance. The return of the Anunnaki leaders after the deluge, as depicted in some texts, was not a triumphant re-entry into a devastated world, but a sober assessment of their grand experiment. Enlil, the architect of the deluge, would have surveyed the transformed earth, his gaze analytical, seeking confirmation that his brutal solution had achieved its intended outcome. Enki, still harboring a protective instinct for his creation, would have ensured that the survivors were treated with a degree of care, albeit within the confines of the Anunnaki's overall agenda. Their interactions with the new humanity would have been more direct, their presence more pronounced, as they actively shaped the trajectory of civilization. The air around their new settlements, often described as radiating a strange, almost imperceptible energy, would have been a constant reminder of their advanced presence. This deliberate intervention into humanity's post-deluge development established a profound, albeit often unacknowledged, legacy. The myths of divine creation, the stories of gods walking among men, the very foundations of early religious practices, all could be seen as echoes of the Anunnaki's guiding hand. They didn't just restart humanity, they meticulously groomed it, cultivating specific traits, instilling certain beliefs, and steering the nascent civilizations towards a future that aligned with their cryptic cosmic objectives. The memory of the flood, a collective trauma etched into the deepest subconscious of the species, would forever serve as a powerful deterrent, a silent reminder that the fate of humanity lay not entirely in its own hands, but in the calculating gaze of its powerful, enigmatic creators. It's a chilling thought that the very trajectory of our civilization was not organic, but meticulously planned and brutally reset. The legacy of the deluge, interpreted through this lens of Anunnaki intervention, is a profound and unsettling one. It suggests that human history isn't a linear, self-driven progression, but a series of managed resets, guided by an intelligence far beyond our current comprehension. The story of Utnapishtim, or Noah, therefore becomes not just a tale of miraculous survival, but a testament to a deliberate act of genetic preservation, a chosen few selected to carry the torch of a rebooted humanity. The Anunnaki, having meticulously planned and executed the global flood, then oversaw the arduous task of rebuilding and repopulating the earth. Their role transitioned from engineering catastrophe to engineering civilization itself, albeit with a profound understanding of their own power and the fragility of their creation. The immediate aftermath would have seen the Anunnaki, or their designated emissaries, providing unprecedented assistance and guidance. Imagine their advanced craft descending from the still turbulent skies, their occupants, regal and imposing, walking among the shell-shocked survivors. They would have imparted knowledge on architecture, sophisticated agricultural techniques, and perhaps even rudimentary forms of governance, all designed to establish an orderly, compliant society, one that wouldn't repeat the errors of the past. The early ziggurats and temples that soon dotted the Mesopotamian landscape weren't merely places of worship. They were, potentially, command centers, observation posts, and even communication hubs for the Anunnaki, symbols of their enduring presence and authority. The very fabric of early civilization, with its strict hierarchies and deference to divine authority, might be a direct reflection of this post-deluge Anunnaki influence. The Anunnaki's initial purpose for humanity, the mining of gold, would have continued, but now under more stringent, efficient conditions. The new human populations, having witnessed the devastating power of their creators, would have been far more compliant, their labor more focused. The memory of the deluge would have served as a powerful unspoken contract: obey and survive, disobey and face annihilation. This cycle of control, intervention, and selective breeding, if true, profoundly reshapes our understanding of human evolution, suggesting that our intelligence, our societal structures, and even our spiritual beliefs were not entirely organic, but subtly or overtly guided by an extraterrestrial hand. The Anunnaki weren't just ancient gods, they were the cosmic gardeners, pruning and cultivating humanity for reasons still shrouded in the mists of deep time. However, the narrative doesn't end with a simple resolution. The Anunnaki eventually, according to these interpretations, withdrew their overt presence, leaving humanity to continue its development, albeit with the indelible imprint of their intervention. But their departure wasn't necessarily an abdication of control. It could have been a strategic withdrawal, a shift to a more subtle, less direct form of oversight. They had initiated the reset, established the parameters for the new humanity, and then allowed the experiment to run, perhaps with intermittent checks and balances. The question then becomes, have they truly left? Or are they still watching, observing our current trajectory, perhaps contemplating another reset if humanity once again strays too far from their enigmatic grand design? The echoes of their presence, the tantalizing fragments of their story in ancient texts, continue to provoke us, urging us to look beyond the conventional narratives. The implications of a planned deluge by an advanced extraterrestrial race are staggering, aren't they? It challenges the very foundations of our understanding of history, religion, and our place in the cosmos. It paints a picture of humanity as an engineered species, a project managed and occasionally reset by beings whose motivations remain shrouded in mystery. This isn't a story with a neat, conclusive ending, but rather a chilling set of questions that linger long after the last word is read. What if the cycles of destruction and renewal in ancient myths aren't allegories, but historical records of deliberate intervention? And what does that say about our present trajectory, our burgeoning technological prowess, and our ever-increasing disregard for the fragile balance of our own planet? Are we even now unknowingly approaching another critical juncture, another reset point in the grand, inscrutable plan of our ancient overseers? The idea that the Anunnaki, having once orchestrated a global reset, might still be observing us, perhaps preparing for another intervention, is a thought that should send a shiver down your spine. It leaves us with a profound sense of vulnerability, an unsettling awareness that our fate might not be entirely in our own hands. If you've made it this far, you're one of the few who dare to look beyond the surface, to question the accepted narratives and seek deeper truths. If this content has truly opened your mind, please do comment below. Made it to the end. This helps us understand who is genuinely searching for knowledge. Do give the video a like if it's made you think differently. Subscribe to the channel right now and hit that notification bell, because the upcoming episodes are going to delve even deeper into these profound mysteries, continuing this incredible journey of discovery.